I've been asked to give you some comments about Veterans Day. And I want to do that, but I think I'm going to take it down a road that perhaps you've never thought about. And I'll say this, first of all, having been asked to give some comments about Veterans Day is not something new to me. I've had the opportunity to speak in a variety of different places before. But this morning, as I was getting ready and putting my thoughts together, I really began to think of it in a different light. Now, I got to step back and tell you this. The military has been a huge part of my life. I mean, it really has. I grew up seeing veterans. My family has been multi-generational Army. My grandfather was a glider rider in World War II. He entered the service from Auburn University in 1941, went straight to World War II, served through Korea and Vietnam, and retired as a general. My dad retired as a colonel and did 2 tours in Vietnam himself. I'm a veteran. Spent a good deal of time in the military and did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And my son, who graduated from Westbrook, is now on active duty as a captain. It's been generational in my family. I grew up watching veterans and seeing them daily and being taught about patriotism and being taught about why our country matters in the overall scheme of the world. You do live in the greatest nation on the face of the earth. So let me just say, first off, you're probably hearing things out there, seeing things that are happening, people talking about kneeling down because they don't want to honor our country, or stepping on the flag and protests in other places. And I reject that, and I'll tell you why. Because this nation has done more for the world and for other nations and for its own people than perhaps any other nation in the history of the world. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And that's not just a biased opinion. That's the opinion of people in other places. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But let me just say this. Do we have a great military? Yes, we do. Each of the armed services are represented by people here in Alabama and around this nation. Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard, all of them have had a place in the defense of this nation and the values we stand for. But all of them have also done things that perhaps you've never really thought about before. I mean, can we fight? Oh yeah. We are the strongest, most capable military in the history of the world. Do we know how to break things? Certainly. Can we blow stuff up? Oh yeah. Do we know how to fight and find an enemy and take them out? Yes, we can. I mean, just recently we've done some amazing things around the world. But here's a thought for you, and this is where I'm going to head today. It is important that you also understand that the military is not about breaking things and killing people. Our armed forces, unlike the majority of the nations in the history of this great world, our armed forces, we bring peace where there has been war. And we bring freedoms where there have been tyranny. And we bring security where there has been instability. And our people go places in uniform, hard places to do hard things. And when we go, we try to leave it better than what we found it. I've had some direct experience with that. But before I do any further, let me just read you a verse that God put on my heart about today. You may have heard this before. It comes from Ezekiel, verse 20, or chapter 22, verse 30. And God's talking, and he says, "And I searched for a man among them who should build up the wall and stand in the gap for me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found no one." You know, the sad part about that verse, in this particular context, God said he didn't find anyone. What I want to talk about is what kind of person he was looking for. He said, "I looked among them to find a man who would build up the wall and stand in the gap." See, it's important you understand that your veterans, some of them in your family, some of you will one day be a veteran. In this nation, we have people that go in uniform so they can stand in the gap and take the fight to the enemy and do what has to be done. But the reality is they are also people who build the wall. Because there is so much more to what we do as a nation than what you might see in other places. And it reminds me directly of a story, a personal experience I had in Afghanistan. So in 2002, the war was very fresh. If you remember, some of you don't remember, I know, but 9/11 happened. That was September 2001. The war kicked off, I believe, in late October, early November 2001. By January, I was already deployed and en route to go overseas. I spent all of '02 on a very small, remote special operations team out in the middle of nowhere, We were it. There was nobody else in our vicinity. We all had beards, we rode horses sometimes. It was crazy. But we got to know the people because we lived among the people. We were not on a base. We literally lived in a house in an area called Kunduz in northern Afghanistan. And a part of our job, aside from combat operations and all that, was to interact with the populace and to see what we could do to help provide additional security and to assure them that a new day was here. The Taliban had so subjugated that area that there were people who had never been allowed to fly a kite because that was outlawed. There were children who were never allowed to have a dance at school because that was outlawed. Girls were not allowed to go to school at all. Women were not allowed to work, and if their husbands died, it was just too bad. It was a devastated society, and so much of what they had was broken. There was no running water, there was no electricity. And as we began to patrol our area and get further and further out from our safe house in Kunduz, I found a village. This village was called Dehana Dewaran, and it was in the Talakan area in northern Afghanistan. This was the front line. When the holdouts who fought the Taliban before we got there, the Northern Alliance, when they fought the Taliban, their front line was Talakan, and the Kunduz area where I was held by the Taliban. This particular village, Dehana Dewaran, was situated in the middle of a valley with two valleys running off of it between the mountains of the northern Hindu Kush. And when I first found it, you talk about a broken down village. I mean, it was amazing to me. The people did not want to come out and talk to us the first time we were there. But something about this place just struck a chord with me. And so we spent time going back to Dehana Dewaran. It was an hour and a half away from our safe house. It was way out remote from Talakan, which was somewhat of a larger town for the area. And this village had no school for the kids. They had no well to draw water. They farmed on what would be considered almost desert land in some places. The village was broken down. There were old fighting positions left over. There were bomb craters from where we had bombed the Taliban there. There were mines on the ground. It was a devastated place. But over time, as I got to know them, we began to try to bring some relief. And one of the first things I wanted to do was I wanted to change things for the kids of that village. The children of Afghanistan were just beautiful. I mean, they were wonderful children. And just like anybody else, they just wanted a chance to grow up and play. And their parents wanted that for them. And they wanted to have a life. And so when I got there, I noticed as they were riding out of the village, as I was coming into the village, they were riding out of the village, a string of young kids, I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, on donkeys with these huge containers, because their job every day was to go 2 hours in one direction to fill those containers with water and bring them back to their village 2 hours back. Their whole day was consumed by just getting water for the village. So the first thing we did was we worked to build them a well. And then we built them a school. And then we helped get an organization in there called Halo Trust to de-landmine the area. And then we had a farmer that told us that he had a number of our bombs still out in his farm field. And so my team worked with him to get those out and dispose of them so he could farm again. I was talking to one of my interpreters one day, and I mentioned Dehana Dewaran, the village. And he looked at me and he goes, "Sir, you know what that means, don't you?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "The name, Dehana Dewaran. You know what that means, don't you?" And I said, "No, what does it mean?" He said, "All that is, it means destroyed village." I said, You're telling me they named their place Destroyed Village? That's the name of it? It'd be like you and I living in a place and calling it Broken City. That's what they thought of themselves when I got there. I don't know if they changed the name. But I do know this. U.S. Armed Forces came to a place called Dehana Dewaran, and I do know we changed the lives of those people. Did we fight in that area? Sure we did. We bombed the Taliban right out of that village. But the reality is we also brought life. We also brought security. We brought a new day for the kids who did not have to spend 4 to 6 hours of their every day just going to get water. We gave them a school where they could get an education. People the world over look at what our veterans do, and they see that kind of thing happening, and they know who we are. And y'all, I'm going to be honest with you. I had a conversation one day with an Afghan farmer. I'll never forget this as long as I live. He looked at me, and it was right after the invasion. We were fresh on the ground. And he said, you know, he said, for 7, 8 years, the Taliban controlled this area, and it did not rain. He said, the Americans came, and it rained. I don't know if it's true, but you know what? That's a man who believed that of us. So y'all, what I'm telling you is you live in the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And it was made so and kept so by the blood, sweat, and toil of people who put on a uniform to go out into the world and do difficult things on your behalf. It is a joy of mine to know that I've had a chance to serve and be among heroes who served and to be among a family who served and is still serving. Men and women who have served in our armed forces, they deserve that recognition of someone setting aside a day and saying thank you. But I want you to understand too, that we are a nation that has great people who have been trained hard to do hard things and to go places and to take the fight to them if we have to. But we don't just stand in the gap. We also rebuild the walls. Nobody else can say they do like we do. Well, y'all, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, and I wish you the best. God bless.